It's been a great opportunity for folks that have gone through the program, and I'm excited to be here and learn what everybody has to tell us today. This is a great opportunity for anybody that wants to learn more about the marketing side of things for the craft beverage industry. Thanks, Dwayne.
Thanks, Jeff. Go ahead, Jess.
All right. So, thanks to everybody for being here today. And just I'll start with introductions and we'll kind of dive into questions. But, if questions come up throughout, this panel, please go ahead and put them in the chat box and I'll do my best, kind of depending on how many there end up being, to insert them into, the dialogue that we're going to have. So, all right. So first up, we have Doug Reeser, who is a co-founder and owner of Burial Beer Co. here in Asheville, North Carolina. We have Greg Hill, who's a head cider maker, brewer, and production director at Urban Orchard Cidery in Asheville, North Carolina as well. And then we have Anthony Finlay, who is the brand representative of Other Half Brewing, and they're located in Brooklyn. So we really appreciate you guys being here today. So I think kind of before we go into specific questions about developing a brand, if you each want to take a few minutes to kind of chat about your current role and maybe how you got started in that current position or in the industry in general. So Anthony, you want to go first?
Sure. My role here is I'm a brand representative, so I deal with things from sales to merchandise to actual branding material, things for social media, just whatever things are relevant to the brand, and helping put together that information and present things from the brewery to the public. So.
Awesome. And Greg?
Hi, everybody. So I started off with Urban Orchard before they actually opened their doors. I went through, as Jeff had mentioned, the brewing distillation and fermentation program. And about a week into that program, I was hired by Urban Orchard to help them set up and start their cidery. So I've been with them from day one. So I've really been able to see them grow and begin their branding, begin their marketing, help with the production, and see them grow from the first day that we were open until this current time. I'm also now, as Jeff mentioned, an instructor at AV Tech for their brewing program as well. So I do work with a lot of students in the area and breweries in the area and help them get their feet in the door and help with their starting off their career.
Awesome, thank you. And Doug, what about you?
I'm Doug Reeser, co-founder of Burial Beer. My beer background started in Seattle, Washington as just a dork who visited a lot of breweries around the state and the area. Real lucky to be in Seattle and visiting the Portland area 12 years ago when the industry, or 14 years ago, I guess, when the industry was really starting to pick up and craft breweries were growing a lot. The culture of it is what kind of drew me in. And so I pivoted my legal career to helping one brewery get started, figured out the regulatory side of it, and inevitably left my construction lawyer gig to represent breweries, and inevitably helped about 150 of those get started, as well as some wineries and cideries as well. And had a child with that blonde-haired girl that was just talking, and decided to move to Asheville to pursue a dream that we had fostered for many years, visiting amazing places around the world to see beer and take it in and try to put our own spin on it. So our journey began in 2012 when we kind of first formed Burial Beer Co. and formulated the first concepts of it, and it's grown quite a bit since.
And I want to add that Doug is a trooper because he has a newly broken ankle and he still is joining us today. And and thank you for being here because it kept me from having to moderate.
We weren't sure last night if we were going to be able to make it work. So yes, thanks Doug for sticking
surviving. I'll be good. It's the year to break your ankle. It's the year for all the fun stuff to happen.
2020 is not over yet, that's for sure. So as Dwayne mentioned, today's program is developing a brand, you know, kind of in conjunction with, you know, AV Tech's craft brewing and distilling fermentation program. You know, we do focus on craft beverages, but Dwayne did mention that, you know, we really hope that this is just, you know, something that people can learn and apply cross industry as well. And, you know, something that's so fascinating to me about this idea of a brand is that it is this like always evolving process. It's definitely not stagnant, and it includes so many different kind of facets of the business, of a business, of, you know, storytelling, you know, connections with fellow industry members and cross industry folks as well, you know, art and design management, merchandise development, connecting with your consumers. You know, if you distribute your product, you're starting to think about shelf appeal, and just, you know, maintaining a unique identity and relevancy. And so it can get fairly complex. And so I'm really excited to have these three gentlemen here to kind of help us unpack some of that. So kind of starting from the beginning, I mean, what kind of considerations go into creating a brand? Doug, you want to take that first?
Yeah, I think at least with regard to what we were doing, we were always trying to be both creative, you know, and unique, that creative, unique piece, while also being deeply connected to who we were as people. I don't think it can ever come across authentic if what you're putting out there does not feel like it's an extension of the people behind it. And so, you know, Burial, for instance, our name, you know, came from the life that Jess and I had in New Orleans before we moved out to Seattle. It was kind of a very life-changing, awakening community to be a part of, and a place where death was not feared. It was celebrated and revered. And, you know, mourning was an act of celebration of life, and not a, you know, throw your black on and drink whiskey. I mean, they were drinking whiskey, but they were parading through the streets. And, you know, I think that, especially as we got older and we had, I remember, you know, when we were kind of coming up with the name was the time that she was actually pregnant with our first son. And to really become cognizant of life on earth and how short it is, and respective of its boundaries, like, it was a fitting name. It meant something to us. It had changed who we were as people. And it became something that we tried to really embrace on a daily basis. And it kind of, that mentality and that philosophy kind of carried through to like everything we do in life. And it really became every brand that we did, from the beginnings of Burial, where we were just trying to speak about the macabre of being on the farm, being part of harvest, you know, things dying, renewing, becoming new crops and reaping that. And then we kind of ran out of concepts there. And then we worked into ancient studies of religion, and kind of celebrating some of the artists of the 15th century and their take on life and death, and into just kind of modern philosophy and our own philosophies, and talking about just simple microcosms. Like we did I remember like maybe 9 months ago, I did a upside down floating, what's it called, Jess? The fish?
Fighting fish.
Fighting fish, yeah, a betta, upside down, dead floating betta fish in a bowl. And that was the whole can design, because my kids had watched their first pet die, and they had to learn. I called it the finite spectrum of existence, and that's what it was. And it all interrelates back to like a central core and theme with us. And it's not intended to be like cool or spooky or weird, but it comes across that way to some people, and for some people that's okay, and they like that. And it's not intended to be heavy metal or driven by some, you know, music vibe, but it's cool that it comes across that way to some people and resonates with them in that way. But it is intended to be like, you know, introspective, and set everybody down a wormhole of examining in their own two eyes and through their own view. And so I think that for us, it was something that really meant something to us, that everything we put out was passionate enough that you could feel that in the art and in the copy that we put on the cans, or the story we tell about it, and even in the ingredients that we use to make those products. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's beer. And so you kind of have to like, you kind of have to balance all those things with with your audience and continue to listen to them and find a way to like make it approachable without driving them away. And so I think from the purpose of the overarching, what I was really trying to drive down to is that I think that it's incredibly important to be unique, not duplicative, but not like ever being unintentional or divided from who you are as a person, the people behind it.
Great, thank you so much. Anthony, if you think back, 6-7 years ago, kind of right before, right around when Other Half opened, I mean, what do you recollect when, you guys were all getting together and the brand was starting to develop and evolve, and what would that look like for you and Other Half?
I mean, it's pretty crazy to follow up. Like that went real deep on that one. It's a lot of meaning.
Get used to it, Anthony.
I'm used to it. For us, I think that there were ideas for sure that we had come up with, and a lot of it related to things that we were doing and things that we were into. We had a lot of music references, a lot of references to random like pop culture stuff that we kind of enjoyed. A big thing was the beer. Sam was really the spearhead behind having and wanting to do the beer a certain way. And we wanted that to speak as much as we could for it. So a lot of the stuff was just direct. I mean, the first beer was Other Half IPA, which is just a West Coast IPA. And then, we had Green Diamonds, which was a reference to us listening to music. And then we came up with beers like Forever Ever, because we were drunk listening to Outkast, and we named the beer Forever Ever. Like, I think where, all breweries are different, all brands are different in that factor. Like, some stuff is really intentional and everything is really like super deep and has meaning, which is great. And you build a brand based on that. And the I don't want to say the culture, but the ideas behind it, and everything comes with purpose and designs and the artwork. And even when you do post, everything you have to kind of connect it together. Like you said, everything has to be put into one place. But when you don't, we made a lot of things work off of being unintentional for us, just like random things and having random names and things that we saw in the moment. I remember Sam in the beginning, we had some names for him. He was a kind of a professional cyclist, and he would come up with these names that were like these small towns in Belgium that nobody could pronounce and nobody knew what the hell it was. And we were just like, we kind of have to stop making these because nobody knows what it is. Nobody can pronounce it and everybody's lost. And people are just like literally not buying a beer because they can't pronounce it. So it's like, the idea of, you have to make a decision on what you want to do with things and how you want to do it. A big part of branding is you build it based on what you want to an extent. Like, if you have a brewery that's on a farm and you're not pressed to do things as much, you can kind of build your brand and direct it a certain way, where sometimes when you're in a place where it's costing you a lot of money to operate and everything is hard to do, you have to think about whether you want a brand that will work or that's going to be easier to work over, or if you want to still try to take that chance. I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing either one. You just have to understand what it's going to take when you're pushing each point. So for us, we put the beer first and then work the branding beyond that. I mean, we had label designs that Sam, Matt, and Andrew wanted a look. So we had a team that was able to create that look, because that became a big part of the branding too. The artwork is key. People need to be able to see the can and be like, oh, that's a burial design. That's a Oxbow design. That's Other Half design. They need to be able to see it on the shelf and without even knowing what it is, know or at least possibly think that this is that brand already. So that I think that was the thing that was probably more intentional for us, was the branding as far as the optics. And then we built just it based on what we were doing and who everybody was. We all would sit down and brainstorm ideas on names for beers and series for beers and just put it together like in that manner. So.
Thank you. I think you touched upon a lot of stuff that we're going to really dive into on this panel. So thanks. All right, Greg, as a brewer and, cider maker, as Anthony just mentioned, I mean, the product and the brand are so, they drive each other. So I'm really curious to kind of hear your perspective on the question of like what goes into considering a brand.
Yeah, so for us, it was a little bit different because being cider, we were trying to kind of bridge the gap of being something that's seen as more of like and I hate to put it this way, but more of like a country person's type drink, and to bridge the gap into city dweller type of drink. So that's why we came up with our name, which is Urban Orchard, which ties us to the orchards that we work with, but also brings it downtown to the city where more people can enjoy it and kind of wet their whistle with a new type of drink. 7-8 years ago, there weren't that many cideries across the country altogether, especially here in Asheville. So it was something that we kind of came up with and put together in order to kind of go back on the history of cider in America, but then also introduce it to newer drinkers who just weren't used to the idea of sitting down and drinking cider. So we were just marrying the two types of drinkers into one is what we were trying to accomplish.
Makes sense. And that kind of, is a good segue into the next question, which is, about consumers. And, each of you kind of touched upon that dynamic of, brand comes from kind of the creative space a lot of times of, whether it's the brewer or the owner or other people involved in the company, but then there's the consideration of the consumer. So maybe Anthony, if you want to start, how do you feel like you embody the brand, like you, the company, and represent it to the consumers? And how would you kind of then think that consumers describe your brand, if asked on the street, say?
I mean, we, for the brand, we try to, and it's something we try to do with everything, is we try to make sure to take care of the customer. And so like that, I think we convey that as much as possible with events that we do, with different things that we do. We try to do things to pull them in and to have them enjoy it. Like things that are not even pull them in like a way that's not, but we try to do things that are fun, and we try to make things as light and as chill as possible, and try to just, and I think that comes across in a lot of the branding that we have. It's tough to say, the customers kind of dictate what we do to an extent, and we want it that way because it's what we want to make them happy, and we want them to enjoy what they're getting, and for them to, continue to see us as we presented ourselves to them. We want them to continue to see us that way. So it does become tough because sometimes you have ideas of things you want to do, and you kind of can't do it. I mean, you could do it if you wanted to, but it could detract from what you're doing. So we try to find ways to kind of, build these things that are fun. So like series of beers, like how we did the broccoli beer, and then just continued to get people, it became a thing. When people first saw it, they were like, what the fuck is this? Like, you get talking about food. Like, does the beer have broccoli in it? Does it have cheddar in it? Like, what is it? And then, we made sure that it was lighthearted and people know that it didn't, and continue to grow on it, we made things so ridiculous and names so ridiculous. One of the first ones was the one we did with you guys, was Wangies. We obviously didn't put hot wings into the beer, but people began to have fun with that and kind of draw them into that. And I think that that's a lot of what we do. And, different brands have different ways of doing it, and we try to see what other people are doing, and sometimes see if we can incorporate that with doing things more abstract. But for us, we just try to keep everything as fun as we can and keep the customers engaged in what we're doing.
Sweet, thank you. Greg, same question of how kind of the business as a whole embodies that brand, or some examples of that. And then, consumer being questioned on the street, how would they, you think, describe Urban Orchard?
Well, hopefully they describe it as a higher end version of cider, because that's really what we try to push with our brand. Because we're a little bit of an outlier in the cider world, where most cider companies are going to have their apples pressed or press them themselves into juice, ferment it, blend it, carbonate it, and sell it within a 6 to 8 week period, where we actually treat our cider as a wine, where we age it then for anywhere up to from 4 months, depending on the yeast, up to anywhere to 3 years. On an average, it's about a year that we age our cider. So because of that time and what we have to do for storing it and having that, basically that dollar amount sitting there for a long period of time, our stuff is a little bit more expensive, so it's a higher end. And that's the way we really try to brand ourselves, is that higher end cider, where you have a national cider brand in America, and then you have these local ones, and the price goes up a little bit more as you get more and more local. And it's just been a difficult way for us to talk to our consumers and talk to the marketplace and say, you know, this isn't your typical cider. This isn't going to be cloyingly sweet. It's not made up of a bunch of different essences and things like that. It's all fruit. It's all natural. And it's a little bit more expensive. So we are a higher end brand, and we always try to communicate that as often as we can. And I hope that it gets through to our consumers and they understand that they're paying a little bit more for a higher quality and a better product.
Awesome. All right, Doug, same question for you. Consumers.
I'm unmuted. All right. I mean, I talked a little bit about this in the first question, you know, and I think that obviously ours being trying to be a little complex with it. I mean, I think that the first thing that I always have to distinguish from is, like, we do know that we have a lot of different customers that like burial for different reasons. Some of them just like that it's a kooky, funky representation of what Asheville is to them from the outside looking in. Some people like it because they think it's this heavy metal brewery. Some people like it because they think it's this really just a brewery that makes really good beer. So you're trying to connect with everybody, which is why we've really tried to be very ubiquitous with the presentation of our products and try to offer this introspective, like open analysis. Like, this is something for you to figure out. Like, we don't try to like objectively tell you what it is necessarily. It's going to mean something different to everyone. And I think that that's mainly the key for us always, is to ensure that not only is our beer really good, of course it's going to, you know, we wouldn't put anything out that we didn't think was amazing, but that it comes in a objectively, or I guess just ubiquitously, like enjoyable looking design with really cool story and content, something that people can always dive into. And that's always been our challenge, is just to always try to do that, which becomes very daunting when you're releasing 4 or 5 new beers every week. And I think that, like, for us, it's challenging. Sometimes you want to do, you know, sometimes you just want to do something really, really simple. And I think that for us, what we've done with our brand, in order to maintain that, like, okay, this is what people expect of us always. It's got the burial name on it. It's this. It's going to have this type of name. It's going to have this type of art. It's going to have this. And when we want to get outside the box a little bit, we collaborate. And that's pretty much always been the way for us to share something that can be a mashup or a hybrid of both our brand and another. And Anthony's on here, so I'll talk about other. I mean, every time we do something with Other Half, I think most people can look at it and say it's kind of Other Half and it's kind of burial. Like, it's definitely gonna have some weird long sentence name, but it's gonna be like something that connects with people very simply, like an easy way. Like, we made a beer called I Used to Be an Athlete, which was making fun of one of their co-owners, but, like, you know, objectively, for all of us as we grow older, it was something that we could all kind of leech onto. And it was funny how well it did in social media, because it resonated with everyone. Something they basically all had to say is they basically had taken on their craft beer habits and grown into their 40s and can't dunk basketballs anymore, or apparently jump off trailers, like my broken ankle tells me. So
watch it from the 40-year-old over here now. Come on.
I'm creeping on it, and that's why I'm sitting in a cast right now. So I think that, you know, for us, and I think that's that's something I would offer, is that, you know, staying tight to your brand is important for sure, to keep customers on the hook, to keep them coming back, to keep them in love with what you do, and for it to never feel homogenized. But when you want to get outside of that box a little bit, the art of collaboration is underutilized in that space. And I think that that's been something that's been really valuable for us.
Great, thank you. You know, one of my questions was about, you know, how was the brewery, like how a brewery or cidery, like business name come about? And Doug and Greg, you both did touch upon that kind of already. But if you want to elaborate, certainly feel free. But Anthony, can you dive into where the name Other Half came from? before we.
I said it's like everybody else's is like really deep. Ours is just like want to be the other half of the industry, like just the idea of like kind of the big guy versus small guy, craft brewery versus macro brewery. Just that was, you know, we want craft beer to become the other half of the industry because it was at such a small percentage, and it's grown. Obviously, it's still not anywhere near half, but it's grown quite a bit. So
cool.
Yeah.
And Seth, this is also kind of a good segue. Seth posted a question kind of regarding, you know, he has a niche concept. He has come up with a business name and has a multitude of beer names that reflect the concept. They have a small amount of merchandise and their name is getting out there in the local community. How important is it for them to begin the process of trademarking? They're still about 1 to 2 years out from opening. Doug used to be an attorney.
I would do it immediately.
Yeah, he's got the right answer. I mean, do it immediately. You can protect your name for 3 years, I believe. Man, I'm kind of out of practice. I think it's 30 months. You can have 5 renewals, 6-month renewals. When you file a trademark, you file an intent to use designation, which basically just it's basically notifying the marketplace that you're about to use this name. And I mean, all of us did it. I filed Burial's trademark years before we opened and kept renewing it. I had to file Forestry Camp's forestry trademark many years before we opened it because I thought we were going to open it a lot sooner. We plan products well in advance, and I would say, you know, especially for your trade name, what your business is going to be named, any lines of products or services that you're going to have, and if you have like a core, obviously, like we have trademarks for Surf Wax and Skillet and Shadow Clock and a lot of these beers that are really important to us. We do not have trademarks for beers like Finite Spectrum of Existence or some of those Beyond the Rift. I mean, some of these beers that are one-offs and stuff, it's like you don't need to spend $300 or $600 depending on how many classes you're protecting for everything you do. But I would sure as hell protect anything that you're putting merchandise money into. Or trying to put your name on, because that is a very, very costly lesson to learn to not get that done early.
Yeah, just to piggyback off that, as soon as we had our ideas, we started trademarking them, and you'll be surprised when you get closer to opening how quickly other people will jump on those kinds of names if you don't already. There's just so many places opening up on every street corner that you can't imagine what other people are thinking and what they're doing, and just kind of bank on the fact that no one's thought of that name before. And I agree with Doug on his premise of not trademarking everything. You know, if we're gonna make 3 barrels of a cider once every 3 years, we're not trademarking it. We're just gonna make it and sell it in-house and maybe to a couple of close accounts, and that's it. But the big boys that we make every single day or plan on making every single day and selling out into the marketplace across North Carolina, or a can or package, those ones you definitely want to jump on as soon as possible.
Yeah. Also, just to continue off that a little bit, you want to make sure that you can get the trademark for it, because if you can't and it already is trademarked, then you have to start all over again and you have to find something else. But once you do get the trademark as well, you want to make sure that you go after the Instagram handle, get whatever's closest. If you can get exactly what it is, what your name is, you want to make sure that you get that. If not, you get the thing closest to it that conveys it. That's probably the shortest name possible. And then also, you know, website, everything. Like as soon as you get the trademark, you just jump on everything else immediately behind it. Because once you have that, you're going to need all of that. And if somebody decides to take the website, it's somewhere in between, then you're left without it, or if you have to buy it off of them. So.
Yeah. And I would add, you know, search device. It's always, I'll give you the easy disclaimer. It's always nice to hire an attorney, of course, to do your trademark searching, but like you can do a lot of it yourself to get started, at least to get very, very confident. And then you can have them kind of run those final checks, you know, get on Untapped, search for, has this beer name been used? Because it doesn't matter what, if you run a USPTO search, that's the US Patent and Trademark Office. If you run the search there and you're looking up, I'm going to try to look for a word. Amarino Beer Company. Sorry, I have an Amaro on my shelf called that. Amarino Beer Company, and no one's got that. You got to think about wine. You got to think about spirits. We compete with those products, and so those are competitive things. You got to think about, has somebody been using it and not trademarking it? Because oftentimes, very strategically, I'll be like, oh, I'm going to name a beer this. There's no trademark for it. It's clear. And then I'll look on Untapped, just to make sure no one's used it. Because it doesn't matter if some brewery down the road from Anthony in New York uses it and I don't sell beer in New York, I'm safe. Like, we're allowed to use it in different designations because the USPTO is only governing interstate commerce. And breweries like, if you ship beer around the country, you probably care about anybody's use anywhere. But if you're a small local-based company, you don't need to care. But I can't tell you how many times I was excited to use a name that wasn't trademarked, and then I run Untapped and like Trophy Brew, like somebody in North Carolina is the only brewery in the world that has used this name. So, I could be in 49 other states using that name, but I can't use it in this state because the state law for North Carolina says that if you utilize that name, you've established pre-existing use in the state and you can't use it. So there's a lot of things like that I would consider diving into, just deep internet searches. You can find a lot more use in just searching Untapped than you can in searching trademark records.
Yeah, and another thing just to add on too is you've got to pick your battles on some of it. Where we came across when we started going through all the paperwork and doing everything legally that we needed to do to get control of a certain name, and we did. And then 6 months later, a winery down in South America came after us for that name. And because it's one of our core brands, we decided that we were just going to go ahead and fight for it. And we eventually came to an agreement that we were never going to sell cider down in Argentina, which was fine with us. But it was worth the battle because we needed the name because we'd already done so much work with that particular name and trademarked it here in America. So, if someone had come after us for one that we were selling 3 kegs a year, we would say, fine, you can have it. We don't want it. So you got to pick your battles too.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that there's ways to compromise as well throughout that process. So Daphne, kind of piggybacking on that first question, kind of thinking about these like initial phases of starting a business. So I want to make sure that we kind of ask this question too. So how important is it to market your product prior to opening? So Daphne, you guys, if you want to read it in the chat, I'm kind of posted what she is navigating right now with starting her business, that they're in the very beginning stages, and they had just started to put together a business plan. So what do you guys think about marketing before you're opening, and how far in advance would you say you need to start or would start? Anyone can go. I know it's awkward with Zoom. I can call on you, or you can just jump in.
I'll jump in. I mean, I think this is a really good piggyback question, because I think, legally protecting your brand, getting set up, and like taking your time is really, really important. Doing the legal part. Marketing is scary. I will say that like we have really good success of like waiting too long, like Burial kind of waited until the very end until we had something to really show that we knew was of our level and our quality. And that was great. And then we have another brand called Visuals, which we started marketing before we really put anything out, and we really had any like assets behind it, and it was going to be avant-garde beer, and inevitably it ended up becoming a winery. Like it didn't even have time to settle into a final concept. And I think sometimes you don't know what you're really doing and what echelon of quality you're going for or who your audience is until the day you start doing it. And so to the extent that, you can really ramp up into that space, you'd have to have a really well-developed, I think, business plan in order to do so, in order to get way ahead of marketing. A launch is smart. Sure, like a 6-month out plan for how you're going to launch and like get people excited, and use connectivity in your industry with other people to like get your name out. But, marketing years and years ahead of it is just, you're going to lose people's interest. There's like that perfect peak of like getting people up, and at some point they're like, this is never happening, and now you've lost them. So that would be my input.
Gregor, Anthony, you want to add on?
I mean, I definitely would say that. And I think it's not important to start by pushing like the beers, like having like, I don't think it's relevant until the brewery's open to be concerned about pushing what a series is going to be or something like that. Cause if people see that, they want it. And then if they can't get it, then like you said, like Doug said, they lose interest. So it's more of, like you said, waiting to that right time when you have, it sucks because opening a brewery is time. People like don't realize that. It's like I talk to people and they're like, oh, I'm getting ready to open up a brewery. Yeah, we just, we're like looking at a building and I think we might get this lease. So we're hoping to be open in like 6 months. No, no way. Just no. It's going to take you at least a year, if not a year and a half, if not 2 years. Everything takes forever. If it ends up going faster, great. But you have to have that thing in your head because it's not something about your work ethic not being there. You're relying on a lot of the agencies, a lot of departments, on contractors, on people that are building your equipment. It's things that are just going to be out of your control. So it's important to wait until you are at a certain point that you know that you're close to opening up. So when you know you're within 6 months, 3 months of opening up, you start to post progress pictures of what you're doing or what you're working on, whether it's label art, equipment coming in, the space being worked on. And that's how you want to build a brand first. And then you build the brands within that as you start to release them. Because, if you want to make an IPA that's called Series Blue and something goes wrong with it, you don't want that to continue to be pushed that way. There's a level of, you make something and it can be adjusted and fixed, and then sometimes you make something and it doesn't work out at all. And then if you have to do that, you don't want to have started all this work on pushing this thing that already didn't exist, and then the first time people try it, it's not as good, or you just have to dump it, so now you have to go start all over again. So just to me, as not the brand as a whole, but the brands themselves have to be built as they're coming out. And then as they catch traction, then you build after that. So, that's what we did with like Broccoli. When we came out with that series, we didn't know how it would do. And then it did really well. And so then we're able to build on it and come out and add to it and add on more names and continue to push that brand. So when you're talking about it's more important to push your brand and then worry about the brands within that as they're actually being released and as they're being recepted and as you get feedback on them.
Yeah, I totally agree with Anthony on that. And we started early on with the branding of the company and the idea and what we were going to do, but all of our, and 3 flagships, but everything else we've done since then has been kind of on a, how do I want to say that? As it comes out, I guess really is the way Anthony said it, where we have started with 3 flagships and now we're at 4, but we have 4 other series that are considered flagships based on seasons. And we had no idea how those were going to do. We also had no idea how or who we were going to market those to. There were several when we started that we were like, oh, this is going to be for this crowd. And it's a completely different crowd that actually buys it and drinks it on a regular basis. So it's tough to market to a certain area with a brand or certain segment of the population because you just don't know what they're actually going to then perceive as what they feel is their type of cider or their beer.
Absolutely. So many like follow-up things from just this particular conversation. Kind of that idea that like the brand has to evolve based on so many outside factors. But before we get there, product development. So what does that kind of look like for each of your businesses, both, and how connected is the cider or beer to the brand, like the style itself? So Parker, wanted to know, again, basically the beer styles produced by the brewery, do they have any direct ties into the brand, or do you view your brand as primarily a brewer of a specific style or styles? And what are your thoughts about integrating beer style into brand identity? So I think that ties in nicely into that kind of like topic of brand development, from kind of beginning to release to the customer, what that process looks like, and touching upon Parker's question as well about beer or cider and brand identity, the product itself. Greg, you want to elaborate a little bit?
I mean, I could talk a little bit more about the product development side of it, and then how we go about that way. But really, that's where the fun of this industry is being creative. A lot of times it's just we're out and about and we see, or eat something or drink something and we're like, oh, we want to make a cider of that. How do we do that? So it comes from one ingredient maybe, or we go into a collaboration with a farm or another brewery that wants to do a specific type of ingredient. And then we kind of work together on how we do that. For instance, sometimes I'll be given the task of making up something brand new. We did a collaboration with a real estate venture that was here in Nashville a couple of years ago. And for whatever reason, the people involved had this great idea to tie it into the dessert of Bananas Foster. And so I had to make a cider that tasted like Bananas Foster. So it's just using your creativity to come up with that. It wasn't really something connected to Urban Orchard as a brand, but it was connected to what those people were doing for that particular event. So you can kind of separate yourself a little bit when you're doing product development from your brand if you need to. And then you can just dive right in and keep it as your own brand and do it yourself. So it's a little bit of creativity, and then also sometimes people just giving you an ingredient to run with or an idea to run with.
Awesome. Thank you. Doug, you want to take that question?
Yes. Yeah, we decided about a year and a half ago to really focus on what our customers loved and what we thought we were great at. And I think that, you know, before that, we wanted to be everybody's everything. You know, everybody always wants to be everybody's everything. We'll make all the styles that'll make everyone happy every time they come. And the reality is you just can't do that. You're always denying people, you know, if we were like, oh, we're going to have one Saison, we're going to have one English Ale, and we're going to have one IPA, and we're going to have one, you know, and 70% of your customers that come in that door just want to drink IPA, and you've got one for them, you're not pleasing them. So we, I guess it was about the start of 2019, really decided to hone in on what we believe we were both great at and that our customers wanted. And that kind of defined our four corners as hoppy ales, rustic lagers, big dark ales, and wild and sour. And we really don't navigate outside of those channels. And we really have taken them as like, that's our crest. Like those are our four corners of the burial square. And, you know, that's wider than some breweries, weirdly enough. I mean, Anthony can tell you, I mean, they own IPA, that's what they do. And they've certainly made it part of what the other half brand means out there. We like to think that we make really good hoppy beer. We put the effort into going and selecting hops every year. We tell that story. You know, very few breweries do that. I think that our connectivity to local makers through our stout program has been very, very valuable to us. We've embodied tons of collaboration in our wild and sour program, working with both bartenders, or sorry, not both, but bartenders and chefs and winemakers and cider makers and brewers and bands and all types of stuff to kind of build that part of that component. So honing in on what you do great is really, really valuable. I will say that. I mean, Jess and I can both attest to that 2 years of work, or the 2 years since we really like honed that in, how much more successful we've been as a brewery, and how much more excited our customers are to show up. Yes, are we disappointing a few customers that miss a nice rustic clean Saison on a fall day? Sure. But we bring back Saisons every spring, and we bring back dark lagers in the fall, and we treat our customers in different ways from time to time, but we never lose sight of who we are as a brand and what we do well.
Awesome. Well, Anthony, as Doug mentioned, you guys are known for your hoppy beers, but I'll let you kind of dive into that a little more.
Yeah, so we are, and there was a basis of us coming out that Sam wanted to focus on hoppy beers. It wasn't during the hazy IPA craze that's going on now. Sam loved hops and loved the different profiles you can get at them and the different finishes and everything you could do with them. And so when we came out, I mean, our first 3 or 4 beers we had like an IPA, a double IPA, triple IPA, and I think a black IPA, or as Sam likes to call it, a Cascadian dark ale, because he's from the Pacific Northwest. But we did other things. We were doing smoked beer to guard. We did a dry hop triple. We did, like a Belgian winter beer. We did other beers, and we experimented with other things. And eventually we just came to the point where we let the customers dictate. They didn't buy the other things we were making, and we wanted to take care of the customer. And it wasn't anything that was far off from what we were doing already. So we just shifted more into doing hoppy beers. We tried some lagers at the beginning. They didn't work. But the brand over the 6 years now has, we flooded that market with making what the customers wanted. And then we started to reintroduce stuff. So we started to reintroduce lagers again. And now the customers, they want that, and they're starting to buy it more. So I think that, like, you can come out with a brand that's style specific for sure. Again, this is like an opinion thing. It's a matter of what, as a brewery, you want to do. You have small breweries that I know, I have friends at breweries, and they want to do what they want to do, and they can afford to do that as much as humanly possible, and they do it. And then I have other people that come out with a brand and I only want to do sour beer and I only want to do this, and then it becomes not a reality. It takes a long time to make, it costs money, it eats up space, and you can make another beer that customers want and they're asking for, and if you can make it well, they're faster to produce and they make you money. They'll allow you to be able to do the other things that you want to do and to take the time with it. Whether you choose to shift completely to that or you want to maintain with a level of what you want to do. But I think as a brand in general, I think, in my personal opinion, it's not a good thing to pigeonhole yourself into doing one thing, because it makes it so we don't know. This market shifts all the time. Brands shift all the time, and what's happening all the time. I mean, I watched the last webinar with Garrett Oliver, and I mean, a lot of what he said is very true. Over time, I mean, for me, as long as I've been in the beer, I've seen 2 or 3 different iterations of like what drives a brand and what grows a brand and how the market has shifted. And so I think it's important to not always just attach yourself too much of it. That's something that happened to us partially intentionally and a lot unintentionally. So we became known as an IPA brewery, and then we made a ton of IPAs. But we always make sure that we can make other things and do other things. And now that that's become something that's set in what we're doing, we're starting to reintroduce things with lagers, and now we're getting ready to open up another facility that we'll be able to do more experimental beers out of as well, and see how those hit. If people get back into them and they try other things, then we'll continue to do that. I mean, it's important that your brand kind of gets dictated to an extent depending on how you want to run your brand by your customers. So I think that that's integrating style into the brand identity is kind of something that, to me, happens more from the outside to the in than from the inside out.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective for sure. So, kind of touched upon, obviously, product development and how that relates to the brand. What about, like, strictly speaking, like art and design? You have both kind of, processes potentially with an illustrator, you have graphic designers involved. Some breweries and businesses will, outsource that. Some breweries and businesses will have that, as internal employees. And then you kind of couple that with all the different kind of dynamics at play when it comes to kind of merchandising your brand. So you have cans versus bottles in our industry, you have merchandise, you have events, you have general promo. So if you guys want to kind of speak to that art and design process and how it kind of trickles into the different and how your brand has to kind of translate across all those different medias.
Just a real quick answer: it's a nightmare.
Yes, to sum it up.
We are actually in the process of going through this with can design, and it's actually our second go at it. One of the things, and I'm not going to speak at length of this because we're still kind of new to it, but one of the things I can advise is that it seems with us, the less people involved, the better you are. In our first adventure into it, we had 6 or 7 people as decision makers on the design of the label, the can label, and no one could agree on anything. This go around, there's 2 of us making the decisions, and it's gone a lot smoother, a lot easier. And it's just, the communication works better because it's just the 2 of us going back and forth and then taking those ideas to our label person, our graphic design people. So if you can limit who's going to make those decisions, I definitely would advise to do so. But that's my 2 cents on that question.
I think for us, it's the process has changed over time as we've grown. It went from the owners and me sitting down with the owners and us just like looking over it. Like I said, we had a set design team. there came a point where they got busy on their own, and they didn't, they wanted to continue to be creative and work on their own endeavors. So we had to find another designer. And she still works with us, but at times she's busy with her own projects as well. So then we have somebody else. We have a general look, and so we try to maintain that in general. But even within there is some freedom with what we do. But the stuff has become separated for sure. So labels, it's not us sitting down. Everybody's doing different things now. So Sam would be the one who sits down and go over labels. If they question or they're kind of unsure, then they'll send it out to a couple of us if they trust our opinions, and then, we'll shoot back some feedback on it, and sometimes make changes. I have shifted more into doing merchandise stuff just because I have a good idea with that stuff and the looks and how we want to create different products that are somewhat, unique to what we're doing or having something else. But yeah, to touch on what Greg said, it is a bit of a nightmare. And like the more people you have putting input into it, you really you need input of people you trust. So if you have 2 or 3 people you trust, instead of having a lot of other people going into it, you just use those 2 or 3 people. It helps like simplify it sometimes. And it's also not just, they have to have an eye for it, but they also have to have an eye to keep what's in brand or what's off brand at times. Sometimes you make something, you're like, oh, it's really cool, but you look at it and you're like, this doesn't look like something we would make. So it's like, okay, well, now we got to figure out, do we want to try to adjust this image to make it look like one of our labels, or do we want to start again and make a whole nother label? So, it's important with that imagery and the decision making on it that you have people that really have a full understanding of what the brand is supposed to look like and what it's supposed to be, and how when you put things out, it's important that be there.
Awesome. Doug, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah.
I know you do.
Oh man, that's like my pressure point question. I spend the majority of my time going over product development, art, and design. Ours is kind of like a package deal. It's not just another label for the most part. It's kind of like you got to conceive the whole concept as a whole, which means both having like, the name, the concept, the art, the image of how you want to represent it all figured out. And then the beer is actually the easiest part, to be honest. So I would say that we've tried everything. We've had a lot of people involved in this process. Aside from the fact that at the end of the day, virtually every beer has been named by me, and virtually every beer concept has been drawn by David Paul Seymour, our artist. We've had a lot of people in between. What we found really works the best is to let that whole conceptualization, that product development role be in one person's hand, which is me. And we've tried to remove a lot of the other stuff from my life so I can really just focus on that. And to have an art director who's incredible, who can be the link between conceptualizer and executor in our artist. And so it's the 3 of us really in this triangle of me kicking out ideas, Courtney basically turning them into like a really well written set of instructions for our illustrator to kind of execute, and the illustration coming back, us seeing it through to the end, and then her compiling it with me finishing out the copy and content. And we find that process works really well. I would prefer to like not have to do as much as we do, but it's what our customers expect from us. And so we try not to deviate from it. I think we've been able to utilize like alternate reality, like alternate versions of things a lot. That's been really cool, thank goodness. So we're not drawing 5 things a week. Maybe we're only drawing 2 or 3, and we're rebrewing a few old ones, and we're doing a new variation of an old one with a new coloring or new label material or whatever. And thank goodness that went off well with our customer base, because I was worried that we were going to get kind of slapped for lack of creativity for a second. But I would definitely suggest people trying to utilize their art as much as they can, get as much out of it, because it's a lot. It takes a lot of mental strain, and a lot, like working with an illustrator is a lot of work, and it's a lot of work that they have to actually do. So making sure that work doesn't get thrown away and can be utilized as much as possible is vital.
Great, thanks guys. So I know Burial uses, sounds like an in-house art director, graphic designer, as well as an illustrator. And then other half you outsource your graphic design. Is that correct, Anthony?
Yeah, somewhat. It's a weird mix, but yeah, in general, yeah, I would say yes. We don't have a person that's like set in house. We have set people that we work with and that we've been working with, but they're not like exclusive to us per se.
And then Greg, what is Urban Orchard's dynamic when it comes to kind of who's designing?
We outsource it. I do see, I think it's Hannah's question about the budget for it. We are definitely on budget for our graphic design. Luckily, we were able to find someone that does it as contract work. He actually went to AB Tech school, so I knew him as a student, and he does maybe 3 or 4 breweries in town and a distillery and does their label design, and he does it kind of on the side. So the nice thing about it is that he's a little bit more flexible with how he charges. He's new to the business and just kind of starting his own business himself, where we worked with a larger company, and it's basically you get 3 designs and you pay for it and that's it. No more changes. Where, I mean, we've probably gone through probably in 4 days of this week, half a dozen changes on one label. And they're all just part of what he does as a bill to us for his time. So I would try to find an upstart graphic design that you can at least see some of their work that they've done maybe in your hometown or your area. So I knew what he was capable of before we hired him. And so we kind of just lucked out that way, that he had done several breweries in town, and you can go and look at the can design in the grocery store and know that he is a legit artist, but he's just starting out. So that's kind of how we went about it.
Yeah, that's great advice. I mean, other half in Burial, 6-7 years ago, we were both much smaller than we are today. So yeah, to Hannah's question of, do you have any idea, or do you have ideas on how or who to approach for graphic design when you were on a budget?
Oh man, be an artist yourself. That's the easiest solution. I mean, you get to pave your own journey. We started our journey with the first label we ever put out being an incredibly well done illustrated rendition of Skillet Donut Stout by David Paul Seymour, an incredibly renowned illustrator in the music business. And then we're like, oh shit, we've now created this expectation. And so I would say I love what we do in the art world. I love what comes out, but it is it's often daunting. We try to be unique, we try to be different. We, like David, for instance, has an exclusive for us in the entire beverage industry, because we don't want to mix our messaging. We want, if somebody's holding a can of beer that has a David Paul Seymour on, we want that consumer to damn well be sure that it's a Burial beer. So our collaboration is really important to us, and I think that the thing that makes it hard as you become more successful and you make more beer and you're putting a lot more out, like Anthony's brewery puts out is probably even more than we do, probably 6 or 7 new beers a week or whatever. We put out 3 or 4. It means that every single one of those packages has to be great, because like I always think about this. I'm always like I can't half-ass a beer ever. I can't put out a beer that like went through our sensory and was like 80% approved, because that might be the only keg that this wonderful restaurant in Durham, North Carolina buys from us. And thus that's the 50 customers only Burial experience. And they're like, Burial sucks. So I have the same expectations for us with art. If we're going to put out a can or a bottle, we just don't half-ass it. So it really starts with like thinking about that long-term. And we really didn't. Being honest, I didn't think that 7 years down the road, I would be having to come up with 100, new David Paul Seymour illustration concepts every year, and that he would have to be firing on all cylinders to get them done in a way that is cohesive and recognizable to the customer as Burial and our quality expectations. So, I think friends that I know that run really successful companies that were artists as founders, or who were great brewers and found an artist as a co-founder. Half Acre is a really good example in Chicago. it's Matt and Gabe. And Gabe does all the art. 10 years later, here's a brewery that puts 50,000 barrels a year out or whatever. I don't know how much to put out, and does a lot of great things in the national beer scene. And Gabriel does all their art for every single label. So I think that nowadays, and I think that there's no, you either get lucky like that or strategic like that. And you're like, I want to collaborate on this business concept with an artist or a designer who can develop, those types of concepts as a photographer or a graphic designer. Or you try to develop a very, very simple motif, like Maine Beer Company is a really good example. Maine Beer Company is like a white label that literally has like a little squiggly line and a name on it, and it's recognizable. It's repeatable. Every label looks the same. But I think that there are very few examples of brands that get a lot of excitement and acclaim that have that uniform brand identity that just has like different words and a different color every time. There are very few examples of that. So I think it's a harder hill to climb.
Anthony, anything you want to add before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, I think Doug and Greg touched on a lot of things. I think, you have to decide whether you want, it's, you go with a graphic design look, or do you go with a general? You can also decide whether you want to go with an overall look. Like you said, where something like Maine does that. I think that Oxbow does it. I think that, it's something that we do. It's a general overall look. So if we have to get a new artist, or we have another artist come in, they just know that they have this look. They can look at 30, 40 of our different labels and be like, okay, I need to make this label look like this. It's also when we create series are always a good thing because it allows you to create imagery for it. So, specifically with hoppy beers, if you did a sour series, the same thing. It's like, okay, well, this is the sour series, whatever, fooder beer or whatever, or whatever spontaneous beer. This is a series. So now the series can have the same look, and you change the colorway on it, or you add little things in to make changes. But the general look is always identifiable as this series for your brand. And it also has a general brand look. So, I think that there's a lot of different approaches. And I think that there's no one right or wrong one. It's just the decision that you make on what you want. If you want something ultra graphic, then you need to make sure you get your own artist. And then if a person has to be hired in-house, they have to be on board and they have to be willing to do it. Because if you don't have enough for them to do, and they eventually need to make more money, if they got to go, they got to go. And if they're not going to continue to work for you, then you're left kind of lost because this person doesn't want to do it. So if you want to foster that relationship, you have to do it and you have to follow through with it. That's going to become your brand, that person's artwork. So.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Anthony presents a really good point of replaceable. Like you create a concept and you're now I'm relying on one human right now. Now, have we not had the conversations that, poor David could break his hand as I'm grabbing my broken ankle? David could break his hand or get sick, or we only live for so long. I mean, it's something you have to think about very much, and we've already had to come up with, okay, what's our alternative? What's our next plan when we have to move to a different illustrator? Because it's a reality that we all will have to face at some point.
Great. And Hannah, I do notice you have another question, which kind of ties nicely into another theme that I was going to go into. So I'm going to touch on your question in just a moment. So Mallory, kind of, you guys did talk about, Maine Beer Co. being an example, but her question is it unrealistic to think that you can have a standard design for all beers, or is it important to have different designs? Who wants to take that one first?
I don't know. I think that just, again, these are things that it's trial and error, and it's dictated by what you do. I mean, like you said, there's brands that definitely have a set design, and they'll change the colorways, they'll change the wording, but it's the same design all the time, and it works for them. You have some people that do that, and it just never gets any appeal for people that buy it. I think that a lot of any of these things working is going to rely on the product. If the product is good, honestly, you can make almost anything work at times, but I think that that's a very key thing. It's like you can choose to go that way, and for sure, like you said, there are a good number of breweries that do that. But I'll say that every brewery that I know that does that, I know that when I buy their beer, I trust that it's good. And the breweries that I've seen that have tried that and it's not, people don't buy them and they sit there on the shelves. So.
Yeah, I agree with Anthony on that. And there's a couple beers out there that I absolutely love. And if you sold it in a brown paper bag, I'd still buy it and drink it. So it just, I think the quality of your product is really going to set you aside, not necessarily whether you have a select or continuous brand design on your can or your bottle.
Yeah, I'll go, I mean, beyond that, because I agree with both of you guys. If you're shrinking your portfolio is very focused, right? Like Maine Beer Company, I say that example, they put out like 1 or 2 products early on. Those are what they focused on. People got excited about them. They've grown a little bit outside of that, but they don't make a ton of different products. I think if you were really focused on like a couple flagships or, one killer product that's going to be the thing that drives most of your production, then it could make sense. But I've always said that like Burial sells beer not only because the beer is good. Some people don't give a shit that our beer is good. Some people are actually like buying the beer because the art is really great, or because the product on the shelf looks cool or intriguing enough, or the ingredients are fun. I've said that before. It was like we can sell beer from a number of different angles to a number of different people, so I think that it certainly widens your reach if you put the effort into the branding piece and the art piece. Not to say it can make up for making a bad product. You should make a good product, but it certainly widens your reach to potentially people who may not even appreciate the quality of the product inside the package.
I think it does definitely draw people to it, but I personally feel that if the product isn't good, like, your label will definitely, I mean, if I see your label, if I see a Burial label on there and I've never had the beer before, I'm like, oh shit, that looks cool, I want to go drink this. But if I do that 2 times and the beer is not good, I'm probably not going to come back. There are people that will continuously do that, but I'd say it's definitely a smaller percentage. But, in relation to what you are saying, you should be thinking about, even if you are making a set or a standard design for a beer or for all your beers, it still has to be something that's going to draw somebody to it. Like, you want to have you want to have something. It could be the simplest thing, but it's like I forgot what company did just the can that said beer on it. Like, it's the dumbest thing in the world, but it's great. It works. People see that and they're like, oh my God, I have to get that. And they buy it. So
Le Cumbre? Talking about Le Cumbre beer? That beer is awesome.
I don't know I've never drank the beer. I just know I've seen it and I've seen people talk about it. But it's genius. It's like, it says beer on it. It's the simplest, easiest thing, and you want to get it. If I had seen that in the store somewhere, I would buy it. I've just never seen it. And I would try it. Now, again, after I tried it, if it was bad, then I wouldn't drink it. But if it's good, I'm like, this is perfect. But you've already created that engagement. You've got that person pulled in, you've locked them in, and you've got them coming to get what you have already. So that's the first and most important thing that you want, is somebody to see it and for it to catch their eye and for them to grab it and buy it. So whether it's a simple design, a graphic design, or something more complex, they both work. It's just a matter of which one you want to do and which one you want. But you have to think to yourself, when you're building a brand, you have to think, if I saw this on a shelf, would I want to grab this? Or does this look like something that's kind of like dumb, or doesn't look fun, or doesn't look like something I'd be interested in at all?
Yeah, and as a consumer myself, I always like to be able to recognize a brewery's brand when I'm walking down the grocery aisle, and there's, they're all separated out, and I can say, okay, those 6 are that brewery's, because I can just tell by the way that their label design is, and I can recognize it, whether they're the same outline or not, or the same focus. But even if the artist, you can tell that it's the same artist doing that same work, and that without looking at the logo, that's that brewery's beer. And I think that says a lot to people walking down the aisle to try a new beer from that same brewery, if they can recognize that that's their label from a distance.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good point. So we've done a lot of kind of talking about like the product itself, because all 3 of your businesses, do can and or bottle. So something that was on my mind when I was developing these questions that both Hannah and now, Daniel have touched upon is this idea that what if you don't can or bottle? What does branding look like then? Which in my mind, again, when I was developing the questions, this idea of the tap room. So let's pretend COVID-19 isn't a thing. We all have tap room spaces. How kind of important, if you aren't canning, if you're only kegging, is branding in general? And secondly, how does your tap room and the tap room experience contribute to your brand's identity and evolution?
I'm really conflicted on how I answer this question. Yeah, I think it really depends on how big you want your company to be. I mean, there's only so much draft beer you can sell. I take a lot of pride and love in our tap room and our tap room experience, and I want people to come to our Mecca. You know, like we say that all the time. So we draw people in with tap room exclusives and stuff like that, and things you can only drink on tap, but like you can only have one of those. So for every one person that comes in, they're going to drink 1 or 2 beers, but they're going to take like 24 home. And so it's really, for us, because we started that taproom model way and we were kind of small, and it served as a springboard to both generating the revenue we needed to grow in the right way, but also to refine our product and become a better brewery. I could defend that model for sure. But to the extent that like we were definitely stuck in a place that we would reside forever if we had stayed in that model, if not for packaging. And, you know, packaging allowed us to reach just such a large audience. I mean, people don't really think about the secondary beer market that's out there. Anthony can talk about this a lot. It's really important to a lot of us breweries that wanted to be successful outside of our hometown. And if you're content, like, I only want to make X amount of beer, and I want to just serve people here in this town, and I think I can go through that, and you're tapping, that's fine. But like, you know, 1,000 barrels of beer you can sell retail, but if you want to make 10,000 barrels of beer, you can't unless you're in New York City or Boston and have a world-class brewery. And so to get your story out, you're going to have to put it in a package. And guess what is going to happen? If you don't put it in a package yourself, other people are going to put it in a package for you, and it's not going to be great quality, and it's going to be handled really poorly. I mean, we learned that early on. We tried to fill growlers and stuff. People don't take care of growlers. We also started distributing double IPAs and triple IPA kegs. We don't do that anymore because shops would fill growlers of them and people would be pouring brown beer online. You know, you got to understand that if your product's good and people want your tail, if they want to share your tail outside, they're going to find a way to do it. And so for us, it was, let's package everything that we can with professional equipment, with our branding, with our labeling, that wonderful story, and let's put it out there. And that has worked wonders for our growth. And I can't imagine us ever becoming, you know, financial whatever, you can throw that out the window, but just like successful as a brand and growth and attracting good employees and being talked about in international circles and being invited to beer festivals in other countries, or all those things that are more qualitative success, you know, those are things that are important to us. Those are things we care about. And if we had not begun packaging, I don't think we would have got to that level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. So Anthony or Greg, just talking about again how the tap room really, you know, examples maybe of how the tap room embodies your brand, and then kind of, you know, playing to Daniel and Hannah's question of kind of like, if you don't can or bottle, like what does that look like when you brand taproom beers, or do you need to put a lot of energy into branding taproom only beers? And then if you can both speak to if you canned from the beginning.
Go ahead, Anthony.
I mean, for us, it's weird. You're not like your images. If you only have a tap room, you have little to no imagery. So what you're doing at that point, your branding is creating an environment. That's how our tap room kind of took off, and how we got a lot of our customers, is we try to create an experience that was outside of the norm from what other people were doing. We had the tap room was tiny. We could only fit like 20 people, 25 people in it. And it was just kind of this raw space that was in an industrial space that already had like these like marble floors that had obviously been like worked over a bunch and had a look to it. And we got some like different salvage materials from like a bar ledge. We got like a coat rack from like an elementary school. We had one of the investors had like a company that would do like build outs and design work for bars and for different things. So he just grabbed like a bunch of random stuff and kind of just bought it in. We had like taxidermy kudu head in there. There was like a taxidermy lobster claw. There was like these random wooden diagrams of like and like an engine piston. Like it's just weird, like random stuff that was all like, kind of, looked vintage and looked interesting. And the music we played and the environment we had and the way that we were with people, and that's what created it originally for us. We were doing growler fills. We were only doing counter pressure growler fills, which became a whole nother thing that was difficult for people to concept and take, that they couldn't bring in their swing top growlers. So that was more conversation we had to have. So it was important that whoever was behind the bar could have a conversation with them and explain the things to them. And like, that's all of these little things within there is what becomes your branding, because you don't have a label. And when it goes on draft, people, again, every market's different. So some places you go into these bars where they have 50 taps, and you have to make this gaudy, ridiculous handle to go on to the taps to be buried in the sea of all of these different things. And we were just like, okay, we're not going to do that. We made it really simple, a little square handle that just had it etched in the side. So it's like, you have all these giant tap handles. So those are like the little ways that you can brand if you're not. But like Doug said, eventually you're gonna have to move into package. And we moved into canning. I think we canned like maybe about a year and a half in, I think we did our first cans. And it gives you a chance to get the beer everywhere, because if you're in somewhere like Asheville, there's a lot of people that are visiting. You have a ton of tourists, so they're going to come in, they're going to buy it, and they're going to go back to wherever they are, and they're going to bring it home with them. So then they're drinking it with their friends, and then it grows, and then they're like, oh, well, I'm going to go to Burial when I go to Asheville, and then they want to find out if they can get it out of there, and then your brewery starts getting requests for things outside of there. So it is always going to come back. If you want to grow your brand to a place, you're always going to have that going. And this is like where I said in the earlier conversation, where if you want your brand to continue to be a small brand and you're not hell bent on making a certain amount of money, and you could just function somewhere quietly in the middle, you can keep it a tap room and keg only thing. But if you want your brand to grow, you want to continue to make money, you're going to have to do packaging and do other things like that.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of what Anthony and Doug are saying, if you want to continue to grow, you have to kind of diversify and get into cans. We started our company more as a cider pub style, where it was 1,000 square feet of bar space, 1,000 square feet of production. And that's all we had for 6 years. And we just like the slow growth model. And now 2 years ago, we got into a 22,000 square foot facility, and we still have the older facility, but it's all just a bar now. And that bar set our branding up as a welcoming family, tiny little place to hang out. And it actually, to me, reminded me of, a long time ago in high school and college, friends' basement bar, where you had a bar set up and you had some couches and some tables, and you just kind of hung out with people you knew. So it's a very warm and fuzzy and comforting feeling in that tap room. In our new facility, we're more downtown, where we have more tourism. We kind of have that tap room now set up as a tourist destination, and all the locals go to our West Asheville location and tourists go to our downtown location. So that's kind of how we separated the two. And just in the idea of wanting to continue to grow, now we're getting into a more packaged product. That way we can go out into other parts of North Carolina and other states. But we were just, from the very, very beginning, wanted to go on a very slow path of growth. And part of that was due to some of the issues that we have as cider. It kind of fell in between two different sets of laws between wine and beer. So when we started, it was kind of, we were in this unknown place with taxation, with the different regulatory bodies that we had to deal with. So we had to grow slow because the laws were changing for us rapidly, because no one had really done what we were trying to do at that time. So we were kind of held back and constrained, but we also liked the idea of a slow growth model and using our tap room as a comfortability, a place of where you can just hang out and relax and have a high quality beverage.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So you've touched upon product, and that being the brand from like an art and design standpoint, as well as the beer or cider style. You touched upon tap room. What about merchandise? How over time or currently, however you want to approach it, has the brand translated into merchandise? How important is merchandise to your company currently, and how do you kind of approach building out that portfolio? Anthony, you said you're in merchandise these days, so.
Yeah, I think that there is different levels of merchandising. That as a brand, you have to choose what you want to do. You can just go, t-shirts, hoodies, long sleeve tees, hats, but you have to also you have to go based on what your brand is like, and not just what your brand is, but also what your clientele is like. We have different locations, and each location wants different things. So if you're our upstate location, they may not be into getting 5 panels as much, or things that are more trendy types of article of clothing. They want they want something simpler. Like we might do something. We've done a couple artist series T-shirts and things like that, where up there they didn't sell. In Brooklyn they sold. So we have to think about that. You have to think about that where you are and what you're trying to do, but you also have to figure out how far do you want to go into it. For us, we want to take the adventure. Everybody likes to wear interesting things and try out different types of clothing. So we've been trying different things, doing polo. We did a couple different like weatherproof pullovers with a local tattoo artist that's up the block, and do limited runs of these things. We do a bunch of different hats, take a bunch of our can designs and put them on them, or just, play around with the logos, play around with color schemes. We did a pair of sweat shorts because we just wanted to try it out, see if it was cool, and see if people would like it. Because we're like, it's cool. Just people can have a pair of shorts to wear around the house, or if they're chilling. We're going to try and do sweatpants. These are things that we made the decision to do. I don't know that I don't think that all of those are necessary. It's a question of what you want, but some kind of merchandise is always good for your brand. People see it out, and if you put it together well, people recognize it, and they're like, "Oh, what's that?" Our logo is pretty simple, and our logo is it catches people's eyes. So when we put it just on a T-shirt, just the plain version of it, people will be like, "Oh, well, somebody asked me about it, so I told them about it." Or somebody's like, "Oh, I saw somebody wearing your T-shirt, so I came down to the brewery because they told me about it." So I think it's important, even just to do it on with T-shirts and basic merchandise. And if you want to continue to do different things after that, or try to make other types of things, I think it's fun. But you have to also. To me, you also have to make your merchandise fit within your brand. I've seen times where breweries make merchandise that I don't think falls in line with the rest of their brand, and you see like people don't buy it as much, or people don't wear it as much because they don't feel the connection to the brand when they see the clothing. It looks like something completely different. So I do think that if you are going to do merchandise, it's important that merchandise looks like something that's connected to your brand. It has imagery from your brand. It has the font from your brand. It has, let's say for us, we want to do T-shirts, and I see like a really cool font. I'm like, oh man, that would look really cool on a shirt. But if somebody saw that, somebody that comes in the other half that wants a shirt from other half is going to look at that and be like, that doesn't look like another half shirt. So I don't know. I kind of don't want to get that. I want to get the logo one, or I want to get this one that has part of the can design on it. So.
Yeah, I agree with Anthony on that. And the other thing that we've seen too, I mean, there's a lot of trial and error on what people are going to buy, but for the most part, we at some point had ordered shirts and they didn't have the ones that we wanted. So we said, fine, send us those ones with the logo. And they were, a more inexpensive version. And they were really we just didn't like them. We didn't like the way they felt, and no one bought them because they were basically like a trashier version of what we originally had. But because they were out of that particular tee, we were just kind of stuck in a place where we had to buy it. And it really just didn't fit our brand, and B, it wasn't anything that customers liked because it wasn't soft and comfortable. It was kind of, I don't know, it was like that really, really firm cotton T-shirts that were cool in the 80s, and no one liked them anymore. So we ended up giving them away at festivals because we couldn't sell them. So you have to watch out for that too, and make sure you're working with a good vendor that can get you what you need when you need it.
You're muted, honey.
Doug, you just
Right.
you just look like you're heating up, ready to say something. You were like, "Ooh, I'm ready to go."
Merchandising. Yeah, you know, this has been a really like a long-winded, a long winding road back to the beginning for us. You know, it took us a long time to finally ramp up merchandise. I mean, Barry always sold a lot of merchandise. We live in a tourism town, like Anthony said. I mean, got a lot of people coming in from out of town. This is a destination they're really excited to visit. We were a funky, cool place when we were there, so of course they want to take something home. You know, I would say like early on, I got really bored of our logo, right? And so I was like, we're gonna do crazy new can design focus, like t-shirts, all those types of really cool, heavily illustrated stuff. Doesn't matter how much effort I put into new, cool shirts. That logo t-shirt will outsell everything by like tenfold. You know, people want, you know, things I didn't really think about, like putting Asheville on the shirt. That's important. People want to see AVL or Asheville. They really want to see it written out. They like it. If you're an Asheville business, because they want to be reminded of that trip that they had to Asheville with their buddies for the bachelor party or whatever the hell it was. They also like, you know, the uniqueness of our logo is really simple. It's just a sickle, but it's hand drawn, and it's not somebody else's logo. And so it's simple enough and pretty enough, and the hand drawn like font that our name is written in. It's really simple, it's elegant, it's pretty, and as boring as it might have been to me after 7 years of staring at it and looking at everybody else's logos and being like, theirs is cooler than ours, which is, you know, just a, you know, always wanting what you don't have kind of thing. You know, sometimes you forget how much that imagery resonates with your customers. And so we have customers that come back and buy every logo shirt we release and every color that we release. And I will say that, like, you know, Anthony talking about that investment in our logo has been extremely important. That investment in our locale, you know, being an Asheville business, has been really important from a merchandising standpoint. You know, we really, as we expanded outside of Burial with Forestry Camp, and we have visuals coming down the pipe, but Forestry Camp's a really good lesson. Like we really tried to take from all the lessons we learned at Burial to find both functional things that people actually wanted to wear. Like, for instance, a t-shirt that is simple or has a very small thing on it is more ubiquitously enjoyable by humans than something that's like a massive dead cobra being eaten by a lion in a bed of mushrooms. You know,
Is that one of your labels, Doug?
It probably will be.
Next week. That's going to be the next week's concept.
I mean, you have to think about that. You know, if you're making merchandise for the few, it's not likely to catch on as much. And so we had to really kind of rein that back in. And so with Forestry Camp, we really focused on having beautiful logos, like learning from Burial. Okay, a real simple, pretty logo will resonate with people. It'll sink deep into them and will always remind them of that place. And so we spent a lot of time developing a core logo, and I think three other alternates, and using those alternate logos in minimalistic ways on really cool, nice pieces of clothing and hats and all types of other things that actually were things that people wanted to wear. And Forestry Camp, we're starting to dabble into more like lifestyle, like getting outside of the box of just things you wear and into, you know, well, outerwear as well, I guess is what I mean, versus just like t-shirts and hats, outerwear and gloves and hatchets and axes and all these other things that you can connect back to your brand identity and your story. Because Forestry Camp is this bar and restaurant, this 100-year-old Forestry Camp property that was inhabited by the CCC. And so we resonate with customers in a lot of different ways. Not only people that like the beer and the food, but who also appreciate the history and the culture in which it was built from. And so that's enabled us to widen that merchandise story. And we're starting to think about ways we can do that with Burial as well.
Yeah, and just to add two things, like Greg talking about his story, because we definitely had ordered some shirts at the beginning that were not quality, and we just kind of had to eat it. Like Doug said earlier, also, it's a very transparent business. There's people we can call up and ask if we see a hat, like a hat design that's really nice, or like the shape of the hat's nice. Just call somebody and be like, hey, like, what do you guys use? You got a t-shirt from a brewery that was good? You hit up another brewery and be like, hey, where do you guys get your t-shirts from? Or what model t-shirt do you use? It's like asking those questions, like, has been the hugest thing for us with ordering stuff. Sometimes we go out a little bit out on the cuff and find things that are nobody else has worked with, or we don't know anybody else has worked with it. And so we just have to try to get samples of it. You should request samples if you can, if you're getting something that's different. And also what's really important is to know that you're going to sit on merchandise. There's going to be a large amount of merchandise that you sit on when you want to order smalls or double XLs or mediums. You might make one shirt and all the mediums and larges sell out, and you get a lot of XLs and double XLs left over. You can make another shirt, XLs sell out, larges sell out, but you're left with a ton of mediums, smalls, and other. Like it's what's going to happen. You have to make something for everybody, and not everybody's buying it. So you're going to end up sitting on a lot of merchandise. It's just like, that's just a heads up of something when that time comes to understand that that's part of it.
Yeah, that's going to happen. But they also make great gifts for your family too when you're sitting on them.
When you go to festivals, just take them and give
Oh,
them.
yeah. Double XL. You need double XL? Yeah.
No. Take the show here.
I'll take our double XL. But another point to Anthony's point too is not only just with marketing ideas and things that you need in terms of merchandise, but just things for equipment wise too. I mean, I'm always constantly asking our neighbors about different things that they're doing with how they, get over different hurdles and things like that. And one particular that's come up in the last couple of weeks is how to source or get a better price on, latex gloves, because of COVID, the price on them shot up. What I used to buy for a case would be $75. It's now $200. So I'm working with the breweries around me, trying to figure out where we can go to get those same gloves at a more reasonable price. So think about those things too. When you're needing PPE and equipment stuff, don't hesitate to reach out to your neighbors.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. Especially in Burial's early days, I can speak to the fact that without kind of pooling our resources, that would have been really tough for us as a very small business. So it's a very great point.
Yeah, and don't like trip and fall through bad vendors. Also, like, always ask for a vendor reference. I mean, there are like 3 people that print glassware, and they all aren't great, but some of them are less great than less great. I don't know how to say it the right way. Some of them are worse than bad.
All right, sweet. So I have a couple more kind of like brand element questions, and we'll kind of finish with 1 or 2, depending on the time, more introspective questions. So collaborations and industry relationships, or even cross-industry relationships, how important is that to your industry? And more specifically, how important has that been to your brand's evolution?
I think it's super important. We probably wouldn't be in the position that we're in now if we weren't able to, go to our neighbors in this industry and talk to them and learn from, I hate to say it this way, but learn from their mistakes. There's always going to be someone that's experienced something that you're about to experience. So if you can learn ahead of time and get that information, and like Doug was saying, know what vendor to work with, it's going to save you a bunch of headaches and a bunch of lost dollars and a lot of lost hours. And you can just cut straight to the point of getting to the best of the worst vendors. So I think that it's incredibly important. And not only that, but you will go through a point where you go into your ingredients and say, I'm going to make this week. And then all of a sudden you realize you didn't order the right ingredients, and you've got to go pinch, 10 pounds of Citra from another brewery. And hopefully you've made a nice connection with them and they're willing to help you out in that situation. But it's invaluable to be able to work with your neighbors in the industry, even cross industries of wineries and cideries and breweries all working together, and distilleries. And you'd be surprised too how many restaurants you'd be able to work with and partner with and do things with that will help you grow as a company as well as help them.
Doug or Anthony, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I personally think it's a huge thing. It's a huge thing to be doing collaborations and to work with people. I think for a multitude of reasons, like Greg said, just the help with with advice and working with people, and also creatively building new ideas. It helps you to find new things and try new things and try different techniques and share all the knowledge that you've learned and that you're learning. So I think it's important in that. And then even from a branding aspect, I think it's a great thing. We technically, we send out, we do drops in other places now, but we're technically only available in New York. And that's it. That's where we distro all the time. That's where our home base is. And we'll send a drop down to Asheville or to California or to Philly or somewhere else, but those are just one-time things. There's some people we may follow up with a little bit more. Doing collaborations gives us a chance to reach another audience from our perspective and from your perspective. I mean, working with you guys down in Asheville, it gave us a chance to come down there and people to try the beer. And then when you guys come up, people are excited. You send some stuff to market, but they know that when they come up, they're going to get stuff that they don't get, that doesn't come to market. So they're excited to try it. So it gives you another way of cross branding, of creating events and, building hype around these events, and people come out and have a good time. And that's, it's an important thing. And getting people excited where they are. We go and do events all over the world, and that beer is still technically only available in New York. But then these people have heard about the beer. They'll come out to a festival. They're excited to try it on draft. We might have a couple of other events that we build around it. So it's just more branding, right? Somebody's not going to the festival. Somebody even random walks to this bar somewhere and they have it. And it gets them excited. It gets them excited about it. And then people will trade for it. And so that's cross branding, in the fact that, I think a lot of people it started a long time ago, but it's become more prevalent in the last 5-6 years, where like it's the secondary market that people are buying and trading it. And it's some owners have a huge problem with it because there's obviously people that don't take care of the product probably. But I think a lot of people that are into it heavy have gotten better about that because they have a better understanding. And as it's gotten bigger, more people have learned. There's better shippers. There's companies that just specialize in making shippers to ship cans back and forth that are all fitted and will basically keep it at a temperature. And that allows people to have access to other things. We have people in New York that come into other halves to buy beer, and they want to try these cans out in the UK they can't get, and so they trade it. So that becomes another way of even unintentional, like cross-branding. And so working with other people and working with these other brands and becoming friends with people in different places, I think helps. I mean, there's some brands that don't really do it, and if they can do that, that's great. And you make that, again, it's another thing that you make the decision on what you want to do. That some people don't want to work with a lot of other people, and they just don't want that to be a driving factor for them. They don't want that to become part of their brand, so they tend to stay away from it or shy away from it or do a limited amount, which, again, if it's working for them, it works. And if it's something they don't want to do, then they shouldn't. But I, for one, like the camaraderie of it. I love the fun of it. You meet people that you would otherwise never meet. You go places you would otherwise never go. You create experiences for you as a brand and for your customers. It allows you to create experiences for these people that they would otherwise never have, and even to tack people on. I've had events in other places where a bar has 20 lines, and I'm like, all right, well, we're not going to send 20 beers out. You know what? I'm going to reach out to 5 other breweries and have them send just 2 kegs to help fill up the other 10 lines that we have available. And so a lot of times I'll purposefully find people that haven't bought beer into that, or somebody I know that's smaller that doesn't get any extra exposure. Because people did the same thing for us. When people didn't know who the hell we were, we got invited to things, and it helped us. It helped to grow. People would come to visit New York, and they're like, oh, I had this brand when I was at this festival in Boston, or I was at this festival in San Diego. And then they come and they tell their friends about it. And it's just another way to just continue to help push everything. And it pushes the industry as a whole, to me, which I think is really important, because stepping outside of just your personal brand, everybody needs to grow. Everybody in the industry's gotten bigger because we've all continued to work with a lot of people around us and help push that. And even when 2 breweries are completely opposite, it makes it that much better to bring them together and do it. or a brewery working with a winery or a cidery, or the same vice versa. Like all that just brings more people to your brand and more people to see it. So I think it's a great and very important thing.
Dang it, Anthony! You said all the stuff. I mean, Anthony, our breweries have been in a similar space for a long time, and and so we do a lot of the same. We're just very similar thinking. When we moved to Asheville from Seattle, we had seen a lot of collaboration. There wasn't much going on here. It was like one of our immediate like tenets of what we were going to do as a brewery, to bring other thoughts and share outside concepts with what we perceived to be a very small community when we moved here, which has grown dramatically. But from all the business, purposes that Anthony just touched on, secondary market, reaching new audience, like for us, it's certainly business focused. I would never remove that piece ever. It's incredibly intentional. We want to reach audiences without having to distribute there. When we did our first collaboration with Other Half 5 years ago, no one knew who the hell we were in New York City. We came up, we brought beer, we had a party, and we brewed a beer with them. And from that point on, we had a brand that was recognized in the niche beer scene in New York City. It's similar. I could tell that story with a lot of other cities where we forged relationships with people very naturally, very organically, because we liked hanging out with them. And at the end of the day, like, you don't collaborate with people for the purpose of business. You collaborate with people because you want to spend time with them, because it's the only way that natural, unadulterated, like real passionate shit's going to come out, and it's going to be helpful for your business, whether it be the final product that has a really cool story, or it be the impact it has on what you do as a business going forward. My relationship with Other Half, for instance, has been incredibly valuable to us as a business. Not only the great friendships that I have with Anthony and Sam and Matt and Andrew and people that work there, but we've learned a lot together. We've evolved a lot together in the way we make beers, the ingredients that we use. Sam and I go every year to hop harvest together, to pick hops together. And I can say that about a lot of other collaborators with different things. We got outside of beer pretty early on, working with bands. What do you think bands can teach you in beer? They can teach you a whole hell of a lot about what it's like to land in a new city and get people excited about what you do, or how to merchandise. We collaborate a lot with chefs. What can they teach you? They can teach you about presentation, of your product and how that gets people excited. Or winemakers can teach you about mixed fermentation, or the way that they control certain yeast and bacteria during ambient natural fermentation. There's stuff to learn always. And if you close your head in and you stay in your own community and you let your ego run what you're doing, you're never going to grow. You're never going to evolve. And so for us, the biggest benefit always has been in building meaningful relationships that have helped us grow as a business in our product creation.
Just to wrap that up, one of my favorite quotes is, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. So you can take that and learn from all the people in your industry, pick their brains all the time, and learn something new every day.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, great. Thanks, guys. It was super insightful. So I feel like these days, 2020, you can't really talk about branding without touching on social media. So I'd love to kind of hear some thoughts surrounding, how your business, brewery, utilizes social media to, both further your brand or to get your brand out there, to connect with customers. Like, how do you utilize it?
I'm going to defer to Anthony and Doug because I don't use social media.
Greg is one of the lucky few in the world. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, for us, our social media has become a place to communicate information and in larger events that we're doing for the most part, as far as what's posted on our actual posts. Stories is where we can get into a little bit more finite detail and other things that we're doing. I think it changes with your size. When we started, we were able to do things a certain way because it's, you know, you're putting more of just personal into it, and you kind of don't have as much going on. So there's different things getting posted and you have to figure out how that is. But again, it still needs to represent who you are and what you're doing. I mean, when we were taking pictures at the beginning, it was in our space. We didn't have like backdrops, we didn't do lighting. It was like we would be there and I'd be like, we just canned up a beer. All right, we gotta get a picture of it online. So we just pour it in a glass, take a picture of it on like a windowsill or something like that. Where now we have like a setup with like, you know, you can change the lighting, you can change the color in the background. So it's, you know, it's important with your social media to make it for sure at the beginning on par with what you want your brand to be or what you think it's going to grow, which sometimes is just representing who you are, who the group of people is that own the brewery as a whole. I think it's important that there's information there for them about what's happening in the brewery, around the brewery, what they can get at the brewery. The links are there. And you know, to portray those things, but it's also important to show people the fun parts of it, to show people when you're at a festival or when you have an event going on, to, you know, because again, that's going to build your brand for people to see that and see, okay, well, this looks like a good time. This tap room looks like a good time. It looks like it's fun. I like how the space looks. I'm gonna go there. You know, there's lots of other tricks to working social media and making it more beneficial to you. Those are things that, I mean, I could go into some of them, but a lot of it you can read stuff online that shows you ways to do it. And then there's like, you know, when you get a certain size, you have to pay for things and pay for services via Instagram. Like these are all the realities of it, because you hit a certain size and people stop having access to you because Instagram cuts off the amount of people who can see and receive the messages and that get views and that gets pushed in their feed. So eventually you hit a point where you're going to have to pay them. And that's an important thing to understand, that there is a point when you grow that you have to put money into it. And it's not just like a person on Instagram that you can just post stuff on. When you have 100,000 people following you, have 50,000 people following you, if you don't spend any money to have people be able to view it more, to have it push in a feed, you might only need 50,000 people. You might get 1,000 people or 2,000 people that see it, and all the rest of the percentage of your people don't have any access to it. Yeah, and then there's tricks to times to post, and times to that you have to watch how many views you get and see when those times are that you should post things. Make a decision whether you're going to answer people's questions or not online. Are you going to answer them in comments? Are you going to answer them in DMs? Are you going to have them email people? I mean, there's a lot to pick apart with social media. I mean, I'm just like trying to run through random things right now, but honestly, you could do it an hour talk alone on social media and how it works and the ways of working it and making it work. But I'd say to start, it's just your brand. It's you and your brand. So just put that out there. Take pictures of the brewery. Take pictures of a beer being made. Take pictures of you know, part of the process. Take pictures of the final thing. Take pictures of your space, and, you know, get a photographer. Like, if you have everybody's got a friend that's a photographer, because everybody knows somebody that bought a camera and now they want to be a photographer. So you have a friend, like, oh, come by, take some pictures. I'll give you some beer. And have them take some pictures so you have those photos for them to see, because you want to present this beautiful space to your customers. You want them to see it, and you want them to see all the things about it that you spent a year and a half losing money and putting money into. You want to make sure that they see your blood, sweat, and tears and all the effort that everybody put in. And I think it's, you know, that's an important part of all that. So sure. Yeah. Doug, come on.
Yeah, and Doug, and Anthony, if you want to touch on this after Doug, you kind of did already, but Mallory did have a question that can kind of relate to this. Do you control the social media marketing, or have you found it beneficial to hire a social media marketing manager, or there are firms as well out there to get more engagement? So kind of looping that into how we utilize or how you utilize social media at Burial.
We have people that we've worked with for sure that have. A bunch of us here have a lot of experience with it already, so we've been able to work it. Hiring a social media manager is one of those really weird jobs that a lot of people are full of shit and have no clue what they're doing, and they'll sell you that they do. and there's little things to watch and to keep an eye on to make sure that they're not lying. But you get a lot of people like, oh, I do social media management, and then I mean, it's like a small thing is to go and look at their social media. And I'm like, you don't even know how to maintain your own. And it's some of it's childish and some of it's like high school, but it's the reality of if you want to do social media, you enter into that. There's a little bit more of a closed down way to do it, but social media managers and people that do things like that, you have to, it's helpful if you know somebody else that does it already that can help walk you through it, because I see a lot of people get taken advantage of, you know, like Doug was talking about with clothing, with the people that do clothing for you or do glassware. You have a lot of people that can make it seem like they know what they're doing, but have no clue as to what they're doing. And sometimes it's better off not even having that person doing it, because you're spending money to do something that you could do on your own. Like I said, you can Google tricks on things to do with social media and see different ways to work it and different ways to make it work. I mean, even sometimes just being simpler and not over posting. You know, I watch a friend's brewery hire a social media like manager, and then I start seeing these things just flooding into their feed that I'm looking at it and people are hitting me like, oh, what's going on with the brewery? Like, why are they posting so much, and why are they posting this? Like, I don't understand why this is happening. And so if I'm getting that feedback from random customers that I know from them, it's, you know, you see it. And I had to literally contact that person, like, what's going on your social media? And I go, we just hired a new guy. What do you think? I'm like, he's going to flood it so much that nobody's going to want to come to your page, because you're just hitting them with things and information that's not even helpful, or not even images that are helpful. It's just like random things, which, you know, you would think that there's not information that's not, but there is. When you flood people too much and they have too much to pay attention to, they won't pay attention anymore. They don't want to look at it anymore. So if they scroll on their feed and you have like 4 pictures back to back, they're going to just be like, all right, whatever, and just flip past it. Where, you know, you put some of that information into the story instead of putting it onto your actual post, then when they're going through the stories, that's the time where they've prepared themselves mentally to look at this information. You know, it's like little tricks like that, or like things that you know, that help a lot with it. Like I said, most of the stuff you can Google online, but it's one of those things where you should have people to reach out to, or if another brewery or somebody else that you see what they do and you see they get good responses. Again, this is why the community is important, and working with people and talking to people is important, because you just reach out to them. We've had to reach out to people to ask questions, and we've had people reach out to us, and we give them whatever information they need, because we want to see everybody flourish. So
Yeah, I'll Hannah and Mallory, I saw both your questions, so I was going to try to wrap them into my answer. Anthony, you taught me something. I didn't realize that I need to start spending money on Instagram. I'm like, how come our likes don't grow? We keep getting more people, but the likes don't grow. No, yeah, I mean, at some point, you know, you hit this level where, shit, maybe I do need a social media coach. I would say this goes back to my core feelings about the intention behind a brand. And if you're going to connect with your brand as a creator, as the owner, as the maker, and put a story out there that is supposed to not be bullshit, you know, Instagram, social media is your content. It's really important that you curate that message. Now, I say that with a caveat. All of us want to grow, and all of us don't want to do this forever. And all of us should check our egos and expect that some people can step into these roles and elevate to a place that can evolve your brand in the right direction. I firmly believe that. And we have a head of brand, and we have a brand department, and there are amazing people who are, you know, Anthony, for instance. Like, I love Anthony and think he's an amazing dude and has evolved the other half brand in ways that no one else could do. So that's important to recognize as a founder, that you need to do that. You need to exercise that trust and to hand that to people and let them take your brand in the direction it needs to go. But as a startup, and I know this was aimed towards startups, I would strongly suggest that you manage your content early on. And that I would also strongly suggest that when you do decide to entrust that important piece of marketing, because for burial, it's 100% of our marketing other than experiential marketing, which I'll talk about in a second, because Mallory or Hannah asked that question. Because it's so important, hire someone, bring them inside, make them part of your story. I think that working with outside consultants, and I'm sorry, I hope Mallory wasn't fishing and that you're a social media consultant or something. I don't know enough about that business, but I know that, in the couple times that we tried to work with outsiders to come in and to be a part of our brand identity, it did not work. It did not work. In fact, it worked very, very poorly. I think that especially as a smaller business, it's very, very important to exude that passion, that love for what you do, and that creative instinct that made you what you are. And I will say that my favorite people that I follow on Instagram are those founders, are those makers that are telling their story. And even when they start to divest themselves from their brand and they're like, okay, this is me, I was the founder, and I'm going to have my agenda. And the brand has gone this way because I've hired amazing people and they've evolved it for me. It's still interesting and it can still always be valuable. So starting up by doing it and keeping your hand on the pulse of what it is and what your message is and creating that content intentionally will have long-term benefits to your brand, whatever direction you go and whoever you bring in to help you grow it. Mallory or Hannah, other marketing outside of social media. I mean, we are like wholly social media. And the way we present content has always been about our products. We've really focused. We used to talk a lot about internally what's happening in people and our experiences. Obviously, as we've made more products, and there's only so many days in a week to get that content up before our releases. And B, as COVID's happened and we're not doing events and stuff anymore, we really tried to focus on what our customers wanted to see from us, which was our products. The story about our products. So that's where our focus is. The other thing we used to do a ton was if you're in front of an audience, like don't lose that opportunity to engage them and make them raving fans. Anthony and other half do this better than anyone I've ever seen. When they're at a festival, we were at a festival in Barcelona last year, and Jess and I were videotaping their booth. Because they had like 500 people in front of them going, ooh, der half, ooh, der half. It was like insane. But they build this environment that at every one of these festivities, and we do it too, but maybe not as successfully as them. Like I'm tipping my hat to them, where they're going to bring, Magnum bottles, Jerabone bottles, 3-liter bottles of crazy beers you've never heard about. And they're going to time the tappings. And they're going to, if they showed up to that festival with 60% of the people knowing who they were and excited about them, they're leaving with 80 to 90% of the people being excited about who they are, or 100%. I don't know. But I mean, that was an opportunity. I think the experiential marketing is something that's been really, really important to us. If we do a release, if we're going to be at a festival, we're putting in the extra effort to engage with the entire audience and to get them excited about what we're doing. And we walk away from that with a much larger amount of followers than we did walking into that experience. And there's so many opportunities to do that, whether you're collaborating with a restaurant, an event, or pouring at a festival, or promoting a band, whatever you're doing. There's just so many opportunities to do that experiential piece. And I think it feels organic and natural people to fall in love with what you're doing that way. Was there another question I forgot to answer?
Nope, you touched on all the things. I do want to give Greg and Anthony an opportunity to speak to Hannah's question of what kind of marketing do you do outside of social media, and then we'll wrap it up with an introspective question since we're right at 5 o'clock. So
we don't do a whole lot other than when we started off, we did a lot of festivals. That was our main kind of marketing gig, was go out there and get ourselves introduced. Not only just in Asheville area, Western North Carolina, but across the state and into Tennessee, a little bit in South Carolina and Georgia. And we just hit every single festival that we could for the first 2 years. And then we stopped and only go to maybe a handful a year, maybe even 2 just throughout the last year we've been to. We just wanted to get ourselves introduced, and we thought that was the best way to do it, is to get out there in the community, is through those festivals. And once we got introduced and kind of had our foot in the door in the industry, then we ceased to do those. But social media is our main one after that, after we did that for the first couple of years. We don't do a whole lot in terms of print media or anything like that, or any kind of radio or TV commercials. It's mainly social media that someone in our bar manager handles for us. But to really get out there in the very beginning, we definitely utilized doing every festival that we possibly could.
Anthony, you want to speak to that at all?
Yeah, I mean, just to like touch on what Doug was saying, like, you know, for us, a lot of how we grew was just being out, just hanging out, and just having a good time on our own, but also pulling other people into us having a good time, whether it's a tap takeover or we're doing a festival, you know, and that's how we built relationships. We were talking earlier with collaborations. You meet people, you have a good time with them, you kick it with them, you're like, yeah, okay, let's exchange info and let's do something. Let's make something happen. Like, people underestimate the strength of that. Also creating opportunities out, not just within that, but also outside. Like, we've gotten connected to do all kinds of different things. We were on NBC on the Carson Daly Show because somebody that we met worked with them, told them about us, and then we're able to plug it in that way. So, you know, if you're in a place where you have access to meet people and talk with them, it's important to do that, and it's not about even being fake or being extra. You just build genuine relationships with people, and that's the best way to do it. It's people want to reach out to. They got something going on that they can't do. They tell you or tell somebody else, and they reach out, and you just keep meeting people and build these relationships, and these relationships grow and grow and grow, and they help your brand and everybody else's brand grow more. And that's, you know, that's what it is. And you create these moments also with people, and you build friends also with it, which is important. And that, you know, it's, people don't like to equate marketing with personal relationships, but it is. That's one of the hugest things with it. You know, when you meet people that are fake and that have nothing else but an agenda just to grab something off of you. And then, you know, when you meet people that are cool and you just have a good time with them and you hang out and then you build relationships with them and you talk with them, and you're going to take what they're doing to someplace different, and they're going to take you to someplace different, and you're going to learn and you're going to hang out. Like, you know, Greg's cidery, I didn't know about it. And now, like, I'm just looking at it while I'm online, and I want to meet him. I want to go there. I want to try it. I want to hang out. Like, that's part of growing everything, and part of your branding is to continue to do that, even in the slightest way, by just growing personal relationships. And then, you know, if he starts to push his cider into New York at a point, which I don't know if he already does, it's like, I need a couple places. Like, what's the market like there? All right, this is what goes on here. I'll connect you with these people, and they can help you out. Like, those are the other parts of branding and marketing that, you know, you can learn about it going to a marketing program. But if you're not going to be personable with people and not just allow yourself to meet people and build those relationships, you're going to miss out on a whole level of marketing and branding that is natural, it's fun, and it helps your brand out a lot.
Just to strengthen what Anthony's saying, I did the same thing. I was looking up his brewery, and I have a cousin that lives in Brooklyn, so I was already planning on going to visit her and stopping in and drinking his beer.
Great.
Like, that's huge. And one more thing, just in relation to what Doug was saying, and like the festivals, when you go to these festivals, it's an important thing to remember, because it took me going to a couple of them to really get it. People are like, oh, the customers are super annoying. It's like a big thing with like the industry, with like back of house and front of house, and people dealing with talking to people. And yes, there are terrible people that you're going to meet, and people that are the worst, and people that Yelp review people. Like, you're going to have those people, but there's a lot of good people. And you have to remember that when you're for me personally, I feel you have to remember when you're at these festivals, like, you're there because this person putting together this festival could spend the money because these customers have the demand to want it. And, you know, that's not always the case. Sometimes you get invited at things, but I always want to make sure that those customers have a good time, and I talk to them. And if I can do something to get them excited and make them have a more memorable experience, then I will. And I'll pull everybody that I can in. Like, we bring the mags, and then, all right, our mag is done. Somebody else is like, we're bringing the mags. So we play around, and we're like, all right, we're gonna have Magnum Wars. Who's gonna have the better bottle? And then we're all gonna, get everybody into it. And it's like being in school. It's like you having a good time, like, and you're building this experience for the customer that they'll never forget. If all three of us are at a festival, and it's like, all right, I'm gonna bring Matt. All right, so then you're gonna open yours. I'm gonna open mine up at 2. You're gonna open yours up at 3, and we're gonna do a line, and we're gonna send people to each one, and we're gonna go to the other line and egg it on. It's like each one of these people might have only heard of one of us, and now they're gonna have heard of all 3 of us. Now they're gonna get excited about everything, and they're gonna try it and be like, oh man, this is really good. I gotta get my hands on some of this, or I gotta tell somebody about this. I got a cousin that lives there. Like, people don't realize how much that word of mouth makes a difference, and how much, like, taking care of that customer. Like I said, I have customers like, yo man, thanks for talking to me. It was awesome, man. A bunch of people just really wouldn't talk to me. Like, why do you do it? I'm like, cause, like, I'm here because of you. I'm here because of you. You buy it, you support beer, whether it's me or another friend's brewery, or it's just some other random brewery there. They're supporting the whole scene. And it's important to keep that mentality, because that mentality is what keeps you grounded to them and keeps you grounded to your brand, so that you don't, like, step away from that. Like, it's like, yo, these are the people that want to buy. They want to support it. They want something good. They want that experience with you. And it's not that you have to have this crazy personal experience every time, but when you can provide it and you are in the environment, it's important to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah, those are all really amazing points. Cool. So last question. They're running over a little. I'm going to kind of go a little deep. So we talked about, like, developing a brand. And the question is, so the brand has been developed, how do you keep it relevant? Assuming we all want these businesses to be viable for the next, however many years, how do you do that? Doug, you want to go first? Now you have to scoot out of here in a few.
Yeah, I have an appointment I promised my oldest son I would keep, so I can't ditch him. Never stop creating, is really it for me. I think that, some people will find some level of success with a brand or a component of what they do, or they hit a financial marker they're happy with, or whatever it is, and they just like to hit pause because it's hard. It's really, really hard to get there. And once you get there, sometimes you want to say, you've always been saying that, like, 2 years from now, Jess and I have said this all the time. We're like, in 2 years, it's going to be like this. It's such an unrealistic expectation, because, every year you should be looking to continue to create and grow your brand, whether it be discontinuing old trends that you focused on and working on new ones, whether it be just creating more beers or hitting a new demographic or raising the bar on the stuff you already make. People get bored with what's mundane. There are very few saison de Ponce out there that can be like, we made this beer and everyone loved it forever. It's really, really difficult to be in that space. We like to have some of those stable pieces to our portfolio. Of course, like, we'll never stop making Surf Wax IPA, but we will always surround those stable pieces with our new learnings of the time and new thoughts and ideas and musings and everything that passes by. We won't let those be wasted. So I think staying relevant is both always remaining creative, consistently peppering your audience with new concepts, because they get bored really fast and they'll move on to the next one. Remember, there's like 100 new breweries opening every week. And also staying connected to the community. If we just said, hey, we only collaborate with these 5 breweries and that's all we do forever, we would be outdated dinosaurs in a couple of years. We're always excited about what, new up and comers, give opportunity, share opportunity. Like, you stay relevant by sharing opportunity. We have a platform, we've had a space that we have been lucky to have achieved by being in an awesome community and being able to, like, collaborate with amazing people. And we wouldn't have that platform if not for other people. So we have to remember that that's our duty going forward. And I'd say like every year we're like constantly like just blown away by some, you know, young up and comers that come into the space and are doing something really cool. And we invite them to collaborate always. And so I think that both of those things, remaining creative and remaining connective to the ever-changing market is really, really important.
Thanks, Doug, and we'll say bye. Thanks so much for being a part of the panel.
Later, Doug.
Dude, thank you.
Appreciate
You
it.
guys.
Just to agree with Doug wholeheartedly, is the creative aspect is what we drive ourselves on to. Is, you know, we started off with 3 ciders that we made, and now our recipe book probably is about 110-ish, I'd say, and that's a 7-year business. And I'm always constantly looking for new ingredients to play with and use and learn from other people in the community, especially here in Asheville, where we have a very creative beer scene. But I would never say no to trying something. I have bartenders that work here that come up to me and say, why don't we use this? Can we do something like that? I'm like, sure. Come in on your day off and we'll play with it and we'll figure it out. And we'll make a cider based on what you're doing. Or if one of my crew wants to, you know, one of my guys got married last summer and he and his fiance at the time wanted to make a wedding cider. So they came up with all the ingredients. I sourced it all for them. I let him make his own cider for his own wedding. And it was actually a hit. And we actually sold some to a couple of our accounts. So it's one thing just to keep your mind open to allowing other people to influence your creativity. So I would never say no to anybody coming in the door and saying, how about this or that, or try this. I'm always going to say, yeah, let's go for it. Let's experiment. Let's play with it. And it keeps our customers excited and engaged because they know that they can stop in every couple of months. There's going to be something brand new that they've never seen before or tried before.
Great. Thanks, Greg. And Anthony, finish it out.
I mean, I think that they kind of touched on both. Like, you know, you have to be creative, whether it's, you know, recipe wise and what you're making, creative with the branding, and continue to see how to push things, learn, read, like see what's going on. And also, like, a lot of it's going to go on hype, on the people. The people decide. And that's why it's always important. When I said earlier, it's always important to pay attention to the people and your customers, because if they're not into something, you'll see it. If you see that you're making something a bunch and they're not into it, and they're not buying it anymore, stop making it. You know, it's like, you know, you can shift those ingredients and try something new and make something new and see what happens. You know, it's tough with some of the core brands because it's not, those are things that are there. They'll always have ups and downs. But when you make something, you know, semi-regularly or sporadically and it doesn't work, you just stop making it and make something new, trying new things. Like I said, we're trying to introduce some of the beers that we made before that didn't do well for a bit back in and see what happens. If they don't work again, we just don't make them again. But yeah, and then I think that, you know, Doug touched on like with some of the branding and some of the marketing stuff. We're always building relationships, always working with people, always learning from people, and, you know, always trying to spread the love. Like it seems super simple because it is super simple. That's a huge part of what this industry in particular has an advantage over other things, that you literally just work with people and work with friends, and it helps benefit everybody and helps grow and keep the brands relevant and keep the brands kind of on their toes and trying new things. So.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, big thanks to everybody for joining, you know, to Greg and Anthony for their expertise on the matter. It was super engaging, and I feel like I learned a lot. And, you know, big thanks to Dwayne and Jeff and AB Tech for providing, you know, the platform and the support to be able to have these conversations. We appreciate all y'all. Thank you so much.
And I'll just wrap it up. I wanted to let you all know what I've learned today, if you give me a few seconds here. So number one, I learned how much I really stink at typing. Number two, to Greg's point earlier, I'm definitely in the right room because I'm not the smartest one in this one. Number three, I thought about how much I really hate a stiff t-shirt. Number four, craft beverage people are really cool, even when they're injured or pulling for the Minnesota Vikings. Even though I don't drink beer, I would probably drink one themed after one of my favorite hip hop groups, even if Andre 3000 and Big Boy never have. Craft beverage people also have fantastic online pits and headshots. Jess has a true talent for moderating. I think she wants to become a small business center instructor. Jess, we may have to talk about that. Questions and interaction make the program. So great questions to everyone. Please sign up for the next program. The link is in the chat box. Space is limited, and I appreciate all of you. So thank you.
And Dwayne, quickly, the recording, how will people access that?
I will send you all the recording. Everyone in this room has pre-registered, so I have your email, and I'll get that out to you.
Awesome.
Thanks, Dwayne.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Yes, take care.